Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound Radio Show, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I'm your host, Robert Winfrey. I would very much like to thank everyone for tuning in, for listening, whatever time and place you happen to do so. I mean, don't be irresponsible. But that's the beauty of on-demand audio. You want to listen while driving in your car? Fine, you do the dulcet tones of the panel's occasional arguments or discussion help lull your infant children to sleep? Whatever works for you, man. And believe me, I'm well aware that the oddest of things will put infant children to sleep. And if you find one, you do not let it go. But again, thank you all very much for listening. There's hundreds of MMA-related podcasts out there, and the fact that ours is supplemental to your MMA experience is profoundly flattering, humbling, and occasionally baffling. I really do hope you're not listening to anything worse than what we put on here, because, yeah, but below us it gets pretty bad. But anyway, today we will be discussing UFC Fight Night 130, which took place a couple of hours ago, live from Liverpool. It started at, I think, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Not my favorite start time, because I don't live on the East Coast. I live in the Mountain Standard Time, so that means I started at 8:30, and I hate mornings and feel they end around noon. So we will be reviewing that. We will also preview this coming Friday's card. Jeez. UFC just doesn't like Saturday anymore, apparently. We have this, again, Sunday morning card, and now we've got Friday evening card coming up, so anyway, that will be UFC Fight Night 131, which is a really good main event. I really do like that main event. It's the fight between Marlon Moraes and Jimmie Rivera, assuming it stays together. Knock on wood. I'm not going to actually do that because one of my dogs might freak out. But we'll go over all of that and talk about the news. There was some big news in the world of MMA this last week. Specifically about the UFC's new United States television deal. We will get into the specifics on that, such as they are at this point in time. That's all on the table. So, with that out of the way, let me bring on my co-host, my regular partner in crime, 411 Mania's jack of all trades. Jeff Harris is with us this evening. Jeff, how are you?
Good evening, Robert. Sort of an interesting way to get things started today. We had a UFC event this morning, and now we're here to talk about it today, like right after it happened, basically. It's not usually the usual way to do it, but interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, I usually like to have at least a night to sleep on the fight so that I can reflect on them, but you're going to get more of my immediate thoughts than you are all normally get, so I apologize for that, because my immediate thoughts are usually less well-reasoned. We do not have Pat with us at this time. His schedule today was a little bit wonky, so I don't know if he'll be joining us later or not, but if he does, I'll be sure to bring him on if he does. So, anyway, let's jump into this card. We had some drama over the last couple of weeks about it, specifically around weigh-in day, when we had two fighters miss weight, one of which no one cared about. The other was the main event. Darren Till missed weight. He weighed in officially at 174.5 pounds, which is technically 4.5 pounds over the welterweight limit. It's 3.5 over for non-title fights. Stephen Thompson decided to allow to agree to a catchweight bout under a couple of conditions. One, he actually didn't split the fine with the Athletic Commission for Darren Till. That 30% of Darren Till's purse just all went straight to Stephen Thompson. And there was a requirement that at, I think it was 1 local time, so this is local to Liverpool where the event was, Darren Till could not weigh more than 188 pounds, which he made rather he was 187.3, I think, the official weight, but anyway, Darren Till again made the subsequent weight after again missing officially, and then Darren Till proceeds to win the fight via unanimous decision, 148-47, 49-46 twice. Officially, I was 49-46 for Darren Till. I don't stand by that at all. I just want to be very, very clear about that. I don't think that's a... How do I say this?
It was a horrendous decision.
I don't think it was horrendous.
Maybe not horrendous, but it was dubious. And it is horrendous to score the fight 49-46 in favor of Till. That is horrendous. I'm sorry.
I don't know.
47-46, yeah. But 49-46? Come on. No. That's 4 rounds to 1.
Yeah.
That's 4 rounds to 1.
Yeah, it is.
And the only really effective round Till had was round 5.
That was the only definitive round of the fight, period.
Correct.
So, but hang on. So if we apply that reality, there's only one round that you put a gun to my head and said, your life rests on choosing who won this round. It's Till and it's round 5.
I feel like Thompson was doing more. He was more active, and he was more effective in all those other rounds. If you ask me, I
don't consider that to be an unrealistic position. Maybe round 4. I thought 4 was pretty. When I say pretty clearly, I mean pretty in the sense that like vaguely
now,
clearly.
Look, and you want to know what? This is partially on Thompson as well. Till did not make weight, and I think he's going to have to consider moving up because Dana White was not happy yesterday. He clearly was not happy. And I know there are circumstances, but I mean, look, you're still a fighter. This is your job. You're fighting in your hometown. Why are people still missing weight? Like people shouldn't be coming in. If they're fighting at 170, they shouldn't be coming in 2 days before at 191. It shouldn't happen.
No, you really shouldn't try to cut 20 pounds over a 48-hour period. That's
we know fighters do
ridiculous.
it.
Oh, yeah.
Fighters do it and have admitted to doing it, yet they still do it anyway. And it's very weird.
Well, and it's weird because they're also kind of incentivized. How do I phrase this? The penalties for missing weight are actually not that bad, all things considered. In fact, there was a fight on this card earlier on that we'll get to. It featured the other fighter who missed weight.
I think
that was the first time in the entire year of 2018 that a fighter who missed weight lost a fight.
Right. It's happening too much. Is our weigh-ins? Did the early weigh-ins? Was that a bad idea? Should that not have happened?
I don't know. I mean, again, this is one of those instances where there are pros and cons to it.
Ariel Helwani was constantly characterized as like, could you believe how barbaric the sport was that we made them like starve themselves until the afternoon and wait to weigh in until the afternoon? Well, it seems like what fighters were doing is they were using that cushion of that whole afternoon to finish cutting weight. And they are not ready to cut weight early in the morning, is what it sounds like.
Cutting weight early in the morning is also a fundamentally more difficult process. There's your sleep patterns go in. I mean, weight cutting as a whole.
But either way, look, Max Holloway should not have been cutting that type of weight for a fight with me. What was it? A week notice? 6 days or something? It was insane.
Less than a week. I forget exactly what it was, but
even if it's in the morning or not, a lot of these guys know they have to hit that mark. So they have to take more responsibility. They have to take more responsibility for themselves and not try to cut 20, 25 pounds in 3 days. I think that's pretty simple. Yeah, I mean, they know they're fighting on such and such date. Okay, I have to be able to cut this much weight in this much time. Even Boss Rutten said, you have to lose the weight over 2 months. Don't do it over 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, again, like when those were proposed, when the early weigh-ins were implemented. Again, there have been positives and negatives that have come out of it. I don't think that's just a reality of pretty much anything. There is almost no
maybe we just need more regulation for weigh-ins. I don't know.
I mean, I wouldn't hate them giving back, IV rehydration if you're going to implement early morning weigh-ins. I mean,
but part of fighters abuse the IVs.
Sure, fighters are going to use every available resource to maximize their opportunity to win.
Okay. You mean cheating?
Some of them do, some of them don't. I mean, how do I say this?
Well, fighters were using IVs to blood dope. We know they were.
Yeah, some were. Some were, some weren't. I mean, a simpler way to do that is to simply make sure the IVs are monitored by either the athletic commissions, or if you're having USADA do it, then have USADA personnel monitor those.
Is it within the purview of athletic commissions to monitor such a thing?
I don't think there's anything realistically outside their purview if they simply want to. I mean, look at the ridiculous things they've declared in the past.
It just seems, I don't know.
I mean, look, we
it just seems to me we should either not allow any of it or allow all of it.
I mean, look, the sport is, and this is one of the good things about the sport. It's painful at times, but growth is painful. The sport is it's actually not in the optimal position to grow and develop and change with science and improved data, but it is in a better spot than other sports.
Okay. Well, all right. And I want to talk about the fight. You scored the fight for Till. Why did you reach that decision? I agree Till took round 5. I think you had it for. I think you even had it 4-1 for Till.
I do. I did officially. Again, I do not stand by that. I am absolutely unequivocal about this.
Okay. You had round 1 for Thompson.
Round 1. I think I had rounds 2, 3, 4, and 5 for Till. The one that I am most skeptical about upon reflection is round 2.
Okay.
I think the major moments that led me to score that round for Till were unduly influenced by 2 things. One that I should have been able to account for, which is the reaction of the crowd and the audience.
Okay.
The other is the fact that, and this is one of the reasons I prefer to have, again, a day to kind of think over, to reread some of what I wrote, to rewatch the fights in some cases, is that scoring fights while I am live blogging the event is a profoundly, fundamentally flawed way of doing it. The fact that I arrive at the correct conclusion as often as I do is
well, you know what?
Anomalous.
Only 2 reporters on Media Row scored it for Till. Did you know that?
Did not. Doesn't surprise me at all.
Okay. Here, but my feeling, I wasn't all that impressed with either guy here. Even though I thought Thompson won. Like, I don't feel like Thompson definitively won, if that makes any sense.
Neither of them definitively won. I mean, just look at the reaction that people are having to this, and that negates either man claiming definitive victory.
And here's my other problem. I think Thompson having his dad as his cornerman is not helping him very much right now.
I genuinely have no opinion on that.
I don't know. I don't think he was giving him very good advice in the corner. Because Thompson is starting to look timid, and he's feigning a lot, and there was a lot of feigning in this fight, and very little like actually pulling the trigger. I don't know.
a lot of that was simply how these two matched up.
It was awkward.
And some of it is also Stephen Thompson's style.
A lot of showboating, a lot of high-fiving, a lot of standing in front of each other and not really throwing.
This was a fight that
was awkward.
Similar to, from my viewing experience, which is, again, my viewing experience, this fight reminded me in some ways of the, for different reasons, of the Nunes and Shevchenko title fight. In the sense that I didn't find the totality of the action exciting or terribly engaging on most levels, but there was a significant amount of interesting interactions between the two of them.
I'll agree with that.
And, again, first of all, interest can vary wildly from person to person. I'm certainly not claiming that my interest represents everyone's. But I think to fans of really high-level MMA striking, there were things about this that you might find interesting, if not necessarily compelling.
There were.
I actually liked a lot of the feints both guys were doing. I liked the reads they were kind of making on each other.
But at some point, 5 rounds of that. At some point, you gotta do something.
As a viewer, that can be grueling and punishing. I am certainly in complete.
Feeling out. Yeah, you want to feel out your opponent, but I don't want to see 4 rounds of feeling out and then 1 round of some actual action. And I feel like if Stephen Thompson wants to be a contender again in his career, he's got to. I don't know. He's got to. I don't know how he can sit and watch his last fight with Woodley and think that was an effective performance, because there was nothing effective about that performance. So, I feel like
it was minimally effective. I wouldn't say it was completely ineffective, but certainly it was.
I feel like his manager or his father are telling him the wrong things, and they're not managing his career or his training well. And I think he needs I think he needs something.
Again, as for the fight itself, I think probably when I rewatch that fight, assuming I do, if/when, I'll probably wind up at 3-2 for Till. Again, the second round is the one that upon reflection, I'm really kind of going, you probably got that one wrong.
I'll give Till this. His gas tank seemed to improve as the fight went on.
Yeah, he only really had kind of an issue.
He looked tired in the first couple rounds. I don't know what if that's a thing. But
I think
it seemed
was more. I noticed more of a dip in his performance in the latter half of round 3 and the first minute or so of round 4.
It just early on, he just seemed a little sluggish and flat-footed, and then later on he started switching his stance and started moving around a bit more. So I don't know if I don't know. Maybe he had a bad warm-up. Maybe it took him a couple rounds to kind of warm up, just get his footing down. I don't know.
Could be. I was most surprised by a couple of things from Till in this fight, both positively and negatively.
Okay.
One, he didn't attack the legs as much as I thought he would.
And when he did attack the legs, he was very effective.
Oh, yeah. That was very successul.
So
whenever he and Thompson were in opposite stances, he was using a lead leg side kick to the thigh or to the knee, which is a great technique, especially for someone like Stephen Thompson's stance.
That clearly hurt Thompson.
That clearly got his attention. And anytime
it's weird to me how fighters will do something and it's working, and then they just abandon it. Maybe they don't want to go to the well too much, and I understand that.
You definitely don't want to go to the well too much, especially against someone like
Thompson's
Thompson.
Not a wrestler. He's not a grappler, you know?
No, but anytime you're on one foot, even to throw something like a side kick to the leg, your mobility is immediately hampered. And if Thompson was able to get a read on it, it's not that difficult to angle and counter. It's real easy to especially opposite stance, to just slip in this case because Till is...
I don't know. It worked for Aldo in plenty of fights. Repeated leg attacks.
Sure, until people got a read on it. I
I
mean,
mean, when
again, Aldo was wildly successful, but once he started fighting people who kind of either were able to adequately prepare for them or get a read on them to counter, that's when he abandoned a lot of them and started more in on his boxing.
only two people,
The second Mendez fight is actually a really good example of...
only two people though.
Only two
He
people
still beat Mendez. He still
Sure.
beat Mendez.
Yeah, it was a great fight. That's one of my top 10 fights of all time. I love that rematch. But if you look at
Mendez
where
was
Aldo
was the only guy who tried to actually deal with the leg kicks against Aldo.
Yeah, and he dealt with them rather effectively. I mean, I was really shocked, actually, the Lamas fight. His leg kicks weren't... He landed more of them, but they just didn't seem to have an actual effect on what Lamas was trying to do.
Lamas is not an elite fighter.
Lamas is a flawed fighter. But again, like, for some reason, Lamas was able to actually kind of negate the leg kicks in some respects.
He looked like he didn't belong in there against Aldo.
On balance, sure. And then the second fight between, Frankie and Aldo. I don't think Aldo landed more than like 3 leg kicks that whole 25 minutes. I mean, he didn't need to, but
does Till need to move up? Or is this an everybody gets one thing?
Well, I mean, everybody gets one, but there's two considerations. But you have to also make another couple of considerations for this. One is that he's still growing. I mean, he's 25. There's still a bit of physical maturation that's going to go on over the next 2 to 3 years. 2 is that he is a big guy for that division. I mean, he and Till are roughly the same height. They might have actually been exactly the same height. I can't remember specifically, but they're within an inch of each other in terms of height. But you put them next to each other, and there's Till is a markedly bigger.
But I mean, look at Whitaker. Whitaker didn't even look big for welterweight, and look how and now he's the top middleweight in the world. You know.
Again, I don't know. I mean, I think he will at some point. I believe that's kind of inevitable. Mm-hmm. How soon that has to happen?
My problem is I don't want to see another Anthony Johnson situation. And by that I mean I don't want his career to get temporarily derailed because he's doing stupid garbage thinking he's got to be as big as he can for his weight class. And now, Robert, we've seen that has ruined careers, and you can't deny that.
It
that
has
fighters
significantly negatively impacted several of them. That's true.
That fighters believe they have to be as big as they possibly can at a certain weight and it's ingrained into their heads, and it's hurt their careers. Look at Cole Miller.
It's cannot more than careers. Chris Lieben is permanently on thyroid medication because of the long-term damage he did to his body cutting weight for that many years.
For middleweight or?
Yeah, middleweight. Chris Lieben.
Oh, okay.
On thyroid medication, rest of his life.
There you go.
It's a very, very... I don't want to say random.
It's damaging. It's damaging.
It's damaging, but it also varies wildly from person to person.
It can be devastating to your body. It's not healthy.
You can die from it. People
have.
I mean,
exactly. So,
and yet you also have someone like Tony Ferguson, who is about
a big guy.
He's about 6 feet tall, and he gets. I think he's mentioned somewhere between 190 and 200 pounds is not out of the question for him at certain points.
Yeah, but he's also a long, lanky guy.
He's still cutting down from 200 pounds.
Probably, but it's not like, he's not a real muscle. He's not pure muscle.
He knows how to do it. And again, this is one of those things where it varies wildly from guy
to
guy.
Yeah, it varies from person to person.
Rafael Dos Anjos suffered. I mean, he was a wildly successful lightweight.
But look, Darren Till just beat Stephen Thompson, the number-ranked welterweight in the world, right?
Yep.
And even though he failed to make weight, this is going to, just because of how things are, it's going to move him up the rankings. He's a serious player right now. Till is a player. That's the reality, right?
Yep.
But so was Anthony Johnson. And his career was temporarily derailed because of all of his because weight cutting became an issue for him.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have Till at welterweight for more than another. I don't know if it'll be fights or chronologically related. Call it 4 fights or 2 years, kind of whichever comes first.
But can he be as effective at middleweight?
To some degrees, yes. There's things about his style that kind of work irrespective of size difference to his opponents. He's still going to hit very hard. He's still going to have the same technical application. He's still going to have the same stance and general attitudes toward fighting.
So let me see. How do you want to match him up next? Do you want to put him in there with a Robbie Lawler? Do you want to put him in there with loser of Dos Anjos versus Covington? How do you want to play this?
You could do him and the loser of Dos Anjos and Covington. I've got a sneaking suspicion about this. And I don't know that this is exactly what will play out, but again, just one of those weird circumstances. Because we have Dos Anjos and Covington coming up, not next week, but the week after, I think, is UFC 2, what are we up to, 25?
Right. 225 it's June 9th.
Tyron Woodley is going to be ready to come back, say 6 weeks after that event, give or take, I seem to recall, assuming his rehab schedule hasn't changed.
You think they'll pull the trigger on him that quickly?
I think, and for the purposes of this discussion, the winner of Dos Anjos and Covington is irrelevant for the purposes of this.
But what about
hang
the
on.
weight? The weight.
Take the interim champion, whoever it is. Say they get injured, which is hardly a wild prediction. And it's going to keep them out until, say, December. That's when they would be ready to fight. In November, December, end of the year. And Tyron Woodley really wants to fight between now and then. Who's in a better position? Again, don't get me wrong. I am not necessarily advocating for this, but given the frequency of injuries or other issues, and given what a knucklehead Colby Covington is, it's entirely possible he does or says something so profoundly stupid the UFC can't move forward with him. Assuming he wins. Or, again, the winner doesn't matter in the sense that interim champion, whoever it is, has some kind of setback that prevents them from fighting Tyron Woodley in a timely manner. Tyron Woodley really wants to fight before the end of the year. Insists on having a fight with someone because he just wants to fight, which, again, how likely? Who knows. But it also wouldn't surprise me given the layoff he's had. Who's in a better position than Darren Till for the UFC to plug into that scenario to fight the champion? Assuming the de facto number one contender, again, which would, again, be that Dos Anjos or Covington, is out of the picture for whatever reason.
Conor McGregor, maybe?
Okay, fair. And that is a possibility.
He's not champion anymore.
No, he is not. And that is definitely... I'd be stupid to discount that possibility, but outside of McGregor, because no one knows what's up with that whole scenario.
There's Kamaru Usman,
who just had a terrible fight with Damian Maia.
But he won.
And sadly, he managed to win in a way that actually derailed some of his momentum. And he actually, we'll get to move on to this very quick in the very near future.
If I'm Woodley, I love that matchup, though.
What, Usman?
No, I love the Darren Till matchup.
Oh, yeah. which is one of the other reasons I don't think he'd object to it. We've never.
But then I think Woodley would just complain about it.
He might.
Just because it's Woodley.
I mean,
I'm just saying, if
again,
I was Woodley, I'd be asking Dana White for that matchup right now, because
Darren Till has not fought a strong wrestler in the
exactly,
UFC.
exactly, and not only that, he's getting a ton of hype right now.
Yep.
Woodley has a tarnished reputation, and he's sort of failing to kind of build his persona. Like, the fans see him as a heel, and he doesn't really embrace it. And I would just say, yeah, give me Darren Till, and I'll beat the crap out of him, and I'll take him into deep waters. But the only problem here is, can we trust Till to make weight in a main event title fight when he couldn't do it in the main event for his hometown?
I mean, again, you pretty clearly can't trust him in the traditional sense, but you're also operating under making the best of a bad situation, necessarily.
And I still want regulation for training camps, personally.
I know, you're a big government guy.
Huh? I mean, you know what? The sport has come to that point, Robert. It's unfortunate, but that's where we're at right now.
The only other thing I wanted to say in regards to this fight.
It wasn't the worst fight. I mean, it wasn't the worst main event ever. It has some interesting stuff in it, but
it wasn't even the worst main event of the last 3 weeks.
I think the panel kind of on Fox Sports kind of accurately summed up my feelings, though.
I didn't get to watch a whole lot of it. I watched their immediate aftermath where they believed this was some kind of egregious
And you know what?
decision.
Chiesa did a good job. Chiesa did a good job today. Good for him. I'm a big fan of Chiesa. I don't know if they were doing that to kind of make good with him after what happened in Brooklyn, but he did a good job on the analyst desk.
I will have to take your word for it. I didn't really watch a whole lot
and,
of it.
And you know what else? He did a hell of a lot better than Josh Koscheck.
To be fair, I mean, here's a really, really random comparison. And I bring this up specifically because Josh Koscheck was so bad.
Right.
Josh Koscheck was worse on that analyst desk than the first ever Fox analyst desk. And for those of you who don't remember what that was, the first UFC on Fox event, the first fight between Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos. The desk for that fight was, I believe, Jay Glazer.
Right.
It was Glazer or Menifee. I can't remember which of them, but it was
I think
one of those two.
I think Menifee was there.
Probably. I mean,
right.
Kurt Menefee's a pro. But it was the guy everyone knew, Dana White, John Jones, and Brock Lesnar.
Right.
It was the dirt worst, except for the time Josh Koscheck was
I don't remember
on that
Brock
desk.
Lesnar being on the desk.
What?
I don't remember it being Brock Lesnar.
He was there.
You could be right.
He was absolutely there. They were trying to hype a potential, theoretically a rematch with him and Kane. But yeah, no, again, the analyst desk was Dana, Brock, and John Jones, and it was terrible. It was just terrible. Neither Brock nor John.
MMA Mania. They said he stole the show.
It wasn't hard to steal that particular show.
So it was White, Lesnar, and Kurt Menefee.
Yeah, I think they had John on it at some point. I don't think he was there the whole time, but yeah, it was just not good. It was just not good. But thankfully, we've come away since then. Anyway,
but Chiesa asserted himself very well. I think he seemed comfortable.
Again, I didn't watch a whole lot of it, but you had what? It was Chiesa, Jimmy Smith, and Michael Bisping.
Right.
I mean, that's a solid group.
And Karen Bryant.
I don't count the host, really. And that's not just a knock on her, like whoever it is. I
right.
don't really count them. I don't think they add a whole lot. Their job is to transition between topics and keep...
Smith is a little full of himself, but he does okay.
No, I don't mind Jimmy Smith at all in that role. He's not my favorite guy in that position, but he's not my least favorite either.
Paul Felder's really emerged as a top analyst as well.
Felder on the desk or Felder on commentary. Tremendous job he's been doing recently. All right, moving on to your co-main event. This went about as expected. I mean,
Yes.
Neil Magny defeats Craig White because Craig White was there as a last-minute replacement.
Good for him.
Sort of. I mean, he got kneed in the face and then pounded out, but... Oh, wait. Sorry, before we fully move on to that, there was one last thing I wanted to mention about the main event, and this is particularly about Stephen Thompson. I think it was Brett Okamoto who said this, and I believe it deserves to be brought up again. Stephen Thompson, for this fight, fought a guy a full 10 years younger than him, flew across the ocean to that guy's hometown, fought a guy who was ranked lower than him, arguably won the fight. There's a very cogent argument in favor of Thompson. Watched that decision go unanimously against him and still managed to smile at the end of all that. Look, whatever you want to say about the entertainment value of Thompson's fights and their hit and miss, depending on your individual tastes. Whatever you want to say about some of the way he's performed against, Tyron Woodley or some of the hiccups he had here, I really think that deserves to be acknowledged and applauded to a non-trivial degree, that he was willing to, not only that he was willing to do all that, and watch Till miss weight as well, I mean, jeez. But the attitude that he maintained while going through it...
he was seething.
I don't know. I mean, he clearly...
It seemed like he was bottling up to me. Watch that interview with Megan O'Leary. He wasn't happy.
He wasn't happy, but...
It was a fake smile.
How many times have you seen other guys in that exact same position go Mount Vesuvius?
Robert, haven't you ever heard the expression grin and bear it?
Yes.
Stephen Thompson is the king of grinning it and bearing it.
And he should be applauded for that. We need more of that in the world.
I would rather him be honest than it is what it is.
Nah, I would so much rather people at least put forth a moderately good faith effort to be decent human beings, as opposed to utilizing. At least I'm real as a.
I mean, being honest isn't necessarily. I mean, that doesn't necessarily make you a bad person, I would say.
Not necessarily, but it's the same logic that jackasses use to continue being jackasses.
All right.
Anyway, moving on to the co-main event. Neil Magny
basically... Make it until you make it.
That's another bit of advice that, I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Ha ha ha.
I don't know. I spent 15 years faking ability to tolerate the existence of my fellow human beings. So
oh my God. All right.
Sorry. My mental health issues are not the subject of this podcast. Anyway, on to the co-main event, when Neil Magny basically ran over Craig White kind of like a truck.
I enjoyed this.
Yeah.
I like seeing guys... Sometimes it's fun to just see a guy run over an overmatched opponent. Yeah. You need those fights sometimes.
Sure.
And Neil Magny is
built around that. It's called Bellator.
And Neil Magny is a future world champion, so good for him.
I'm not sure about that.
He's a... Look.
Don't get me wrong. Top 10 welterweight in the world, elite level fighter. Not at all trying to bad.
Carlos Condit. Look. He's got one of the best records in the UFC at welterweight.
Yeah. He's up there for most wins all time in the division, I think. I mean, Neil Magny is certainly not someone...
14 wins
yeah.
At welterweight, never missed weight.
Nope.
Wins over Carlos Condit, Hector Lombard, Kelvin Gastelum, and Eric Silva. Only losses.
I only consider one of those to actually be impressive, but
Rafael dos Anjos, Lorenz Larkin, Damian Maia.
Recently, if you go back to the beginning of his career, he had a couple of weird ones before he stopped fighting
but
he
wasn't. He was still inexperienced and rough around the edges back then. But he became.
I don't hold those against him.
I give Neil Magny all the credit in the world for becoming a high quality, high level fighter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He deserves respect.
Yes, he does. Unequivocally.
And he definitely deserves a bigger fight next. And
Yeah.
if the UFC were to book him against Kamaru Usman, I like that fight because Usman might be the better wrestler and he might be the better MMA wrestler, but
in terms of just wrestling or even just MMA wrestling, Usman is superior.
Right.
Basically everywhere, but
Magny could give him some problems.
Yeah. Magny's a long guy who knows how to fight long. Magny's good in the clinch.
It could very well be a boring fight. Like, that could be a recipe, but, sometimes you still have to book those fights anyway,
Yep. And look, who else is calling out Kamaru Usman? I mean, nobody wants to fight that guy.
I mean, look, Usman, a legit opponent who could probably be ranked even higher. Let's be honest. Just called you out, so you can't say no one wants to fight you right now.
I mean, again, like, this was the first time I have ever heard someone call out Usman, and I'm down for the fight. It makes sense for both guys in a lot of respects. It
makes sense for Usman because the title fight for Usman just isn't there right now.
No, not yet.
And it might not be there for a little while. So Neil Magny is a legit opponent who, if he can beat, that's a great feather in Usman's cap.
No, I mean, if Usman goes in there and replicates what Rafael dos Anjos did to Neil Magny, for example, that's not easy to do.
And I think, and here's Neil Magny's problem, Robert. He's never been able to get that signature top 5 win.
Nope.
That's the one thing that's eluded him his entire career. That's the one thing. That's one of the
reasons I kind of like that fight. Usman represents the ceiling, and believe me, this particular ceiling is not made of glass, that Magny has constantly ran into and been unable to break through.
Right. I love it. It's good matchmaking.
Yeah, I am completely okay with that fight. I mean, that's a pretty easy main event for a mediocre fight night if you give it a good co-main.
I don't know if you want to make that the main.
Give it a strong co-main event. Put it on Fight Pass or ESPN Plus.
Here's my issue. I don't know if you want 5 rounds of that fight.
I don't think I only want 3 of it. Bear in mind that again. I completely agree.
Yeah,
that fight might suck.
It could be a close fight. It could be a close. To me, that could be like a 2-1 fight. I go either way.
I mean, I would genuinely rather, like, all fights involving 2 top 10 guys be 5 rounds. And that's just me. And again, individual mileage may vary. I would prefer that. At least I would like to try it. Again, it might, as an actual matter of presentation and in practice, not work, but I would be interested to see that tried, just because when you get to that level, I mean, certainly the top 5 guys, although half the time you get 2 top 5 guys now, it's an interim title fight, so it's 5 rounds anyway. But yeah, I would just like to see that experimented with, because there's a lot of stakes, and 3 rounds, 15 minutes is not a lot of time. In some ways it can be an eternity, but in other respects, that can be just when things are finally getting interesting. So
I thought the rest of the main card was pretty good, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
You're a net.
I'm glad.
All right.
I'm glad.
All
you
right,
enjoyed
Robert.
And some of this goes to things that it is unfair for me to level against the card.
Yeah.
Some of it is
Arnold Allen looked good.
No, Arnold Allen looked kind of bad up until he grabbed that choke. But that's nothing to sneeze at.
Got a ninja choke.
Yeah, Arnold Allen defeats Mads Bernal via. I've always heard it referred to as a ninja choke. I don't consider it a front choke, because my understanding of front chokes is more in the 10-finger guillotine variety. For those few of you actually interested in the difference, to the best of my understanding, a ninja choke is when it's also called, I think there are people who refer to it as a power guillotine. Instead of grabbing around the neck in the traditional guillotine way, you get your arm really deep in there, so much so that you have the same type of grip around their head that you do with a rear naked choke, but instead of being behind them, you're in front of them. It's a very powerful choke. It's also very hard to both catch and finish. And I want to give a lot of credit to Mads Burnell here, because I counted him out of this fight when I saw it on paper, and that guy came to fight. He was clearly up 2 rounds. Pushed a really good pace, really solid takedowns, good passing. Not afraid to throw hands either. He really slowed down a lot of the offense from Allen over the course of that first round. Because Allen has very fast hands, but every time he would start flicking out his jab, Burnell was able to either parry it and counter or just kind of take it and throw something back, get into the clinch, tire his arms out. Again, Burnell lost this. Again, lost clearly, got choked. But I'm not going to overlook him again. Allen, it takes a fair amount of guts and heart to come back from being down 2 rounds clearly and still have the wherewithal and the opportunism to take that particular opportunity when presented to you.
I think that says a hell of a lot about Allen, and you should give him a bit more respect.
I did.
It was a tough fight. He was down 2 rounds, and he came back, and he did what he had to do to win.
Yeah.
Burnell gave him an incredible opening, and when you get those openings, you have to exploit them, and that's exactly what Allen did.
Yeah, and again, doing that when you're winning can be difficult. Doing that when you're losing, tremendous amount of, again, heart and fight IQ that there's only so much of that you can actually teach. And that's not to say he has bad teachers by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a lot of that stuff that you just kind of have to have. And he's got that. If he keeps working, he was pretty clearly the relevant 145 prospect coming into this fight, and while he still has things to work on, he still maintains that, and the manner in which he won gives me a lot of hope, provided he continues to make the requisite technical and tactical advances, and I don't really have a reason to believe he won't. Definitely keep your eye on that guy. He's someone to absolutely pay attention to going forward. Then we had another featherweight fight. Don't know how I feel about this one.
I scored it. I definitely scored it for Amir Khani. Maybe not 30-27, but I had him for the fight.
Oh, I was 29-28 for Amir Khani. Anyway, Makwan Amir Khani defeats Jason Knight via split decision. There was one 30-27 for Knight, which I'm really confused about. I just don't think you can give Jason Knight the 3rd round. There is a valid argument that he won the 2nd, largely off of his back, because Amir Khani did very little.
Maybe it's because there wasn't a lot of action and Amir Khani was warned by the referee, but even still, that's not necessarily.
I suppose my point is, if you went 2-1, if you gave Knight the first 2, I can see it. I gave him the first pretty clearly because he, after getting dropped Amir Khani twice. It was a pretty wild first round, and then once we got into the 2nd and 3rd, Amir Khani was just able to get reliable takedowns, and Knight was never able to mount anything off of his back. And I appreciate having a really good and dynamic guard. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do. I have nothing but respect for anyone able to actually pull it off in high-level MMA, or even mediocre-level MMA, for that matter. It's just not an easy thing to do. But there also needed to be, in the case of Knight, a significantly greater degree of situational awareness, especially into the 3rd round, that you're getting taken down. and you're not doing anything with your rubber guard. You really need to have a greater sense of urgency about getting out from underneath this guy, and he never quite had that. And in a very real way, that probably cost him this fight.
Did this fight sour you on Amir Khani?
No. Didn't do anything for me in my perspective on Amir Khani.
Okay.
It's basically the same now as it was prior to the fight.
Okay, because I like Amir Khani, and I think he's a good potential prospect, but I think he did some silly stuff here. I think he had some bad tendencies.
Amir Khani is a very intermittent and explosive fighter. And he struggles against guys who can mitigate that, put a decent continuous pace on him, and can deal with his wrestling. Because when he's not able to finish you with a big flurry, he relies on closing distance, getting a body lock, getting you down, and then kind of icing the round from there. So if you get people who can reliably stop him from doing that or keep him scrambling and active, this is one of the ways Arnold Allen beat him, that's where he really that's where his game kind of starts to fall apart. And it was true before this fight. It was pretty clearly still true during this fight. Again, there's things he has to work on. On the plus side, he's a young guy with a good base. He can, assuming he works on them, there's no reason he can't. But, again, this was another fight that went about as expected. Moving on, this fight surprised me a little bit. Claudio Silva, who had a, 4-year layoff? Yeah, prior to this fight, his last fight was November of 2014, when he defeated Leon Edwards. He suffered a series of injuries that just kind of kept him from getting back into the cage. His weight ballooned up. I mean, he's talked a little bit about this. But for anyone to come off of that kind of a layoff and to beat Nordine Taleb is not easy to beat anyway. To do so after that significant of a layoff and to finish him in the first round, got him with a rear naked choke. I mean, that is just that circumstance is impressive. I mean, there was a fair amount of kind of hype around Silva after he beat Leon Edwards. And that was a split decision, but this was clearly an intelligent fighter. He was able to mix his ability to analyze and think with an actual ability to fight. And again, after a 4-year layoff, he beat one of the. I mean, again, Nordine Taleb is no one to trifle with. His only UFC losses are to Warley Alves and Santiago Ponzinibbio. He was on a 2-fight winning streak. He was kind of coming into his own, and for Silva to come in and kind of do what he did, because they were even for a while. Again, this wasn't all Silva all the time, but when you consider the totality of circumstances, it was a very impressive outing from Silva, and hopefully he can stay healthy this time, because it's not welterweight's a good division, but it's not like having more guys hurts it. So, Jeff, your thoughts? I mean, that's a 4-year layoff. That's significant.
I was gobsmacked. One of the most shocking performances of the night, because, again, Nordine Taleb, he is a good fighter, and I did not expect that to happen at all. But, man, I'll be curious to see if this was kind of like, I don't want to say fluke, but if he can maintain this momentum, and have another fight again soon, if he can build off of this. But, I was, you can't overlook anyone in this sport. It just goes to show you. It's
Yeah.
proof of how crazy this sport is.
I do want to, in the instance, in the issue, interest. Thank you, Robert. In the interest of full disclosure, I do want to point out that I said last week that when I picked him, I was basing it on the assumption that he was who I was thinking of. I believe I was confusing him with someone else last week, so I really only should get partial credit.
Do you remember who it was?
Who I was confusing him with?
Yeah.
It's another De Silva. I'm not sure he's even
Is
still
there a
with...
Claudio De Silva?
I'm not sure. No, I don't think there's another Claudio De Silva. But he's Claudio Henrique De Silva. And I know there was a heavyweight and light heavyweight Henrique De Silva, who I thought I might have been confusing him with. When I looked up his record, realized what weight class he was at, I wasn't thinking of this guy, and I can't remember who I was confusing him with specifically. But again, I just wanted to, again, full disclosure, I was correct, but it was more incidental than deliberate.
Is Claudio Silva his real name?
Yeah, he's Claudio.
Oh, it's Claudio Henrique. Okay, so it's just another one of those UFC using a reappropriate.
It's just easier to shorten it. It's easier to promote him, and at least they're not promoting him by some nickname, like Godofredo Pepe. Come on, sorry. My issues with
Honey Jason. Honey Jason, is his real name even Honey Jason?
Oh no, he is Hani isn't even his first name.
Hani Mariano Becerra.
Yeah, he's got a weird, and to be fair, he has a very unwieldy name, so I kind of understand why he's Mirko Krokop. Krokop is not his last name.
It's Filipovic.
I believe it's pronounced Filipovic, but
Filipovic.
My understanding, it's Croatian. I might be mispronouncing a vowel.
People just like to call him. In the Pride era, people just like to call fighters by their nicknames.
Yeah, and
they kind of brand.
I get it. I mean, especially
they branded those guys a lot. Those guys were.
I mean, especially if you're trying to sell Slavic named fighters to a Japanese audience. There's.
Yep.
Krokop is so much easier, even for
Yep.
an English speaker, than Filipovic.
Yep.
Anyway, and kicking off the main card, Darren Stewart finally got a UFC win. Well, bully for him. He TKO'd Eric Spicely in the second round.
Provided it doesn't get overturned.
This one was not set up by a headbutt, which was the issue he had with his previous sort of win in the UFC, was that it was clearly...
Right.
There was clearly a headbutt that caused that.
Which is, look, it's the right thing to do.
It is. And they gave him an immediate rematch, and Barroso dominated him. And this was a solid enough performance from Stewart. He's still got a bevy of issues, but he has fast hands, and he's a relatively accurate striker.
And I liked his post-fight speech. Good for him.
When it's nice when you see how much this means to fighters, because it should. This is their livelihood, and it's always nice to see. Part of the reason I think we watch this sport is not just for the violence or the athletic excellence. There's a degree of. I don't want to get too deep into the philosophy of it. To put it somewhat blithely, there is a human interest component to it, and when you get to see behind the the metaphorical curtain that fighters put up, it's nice. Anyway, that was the main card. As for the prelims, Tom Breeze defeated Dan Kelly via TKO in the first round. Nice to see Breeze back after his extended hiatus. Feel bad for Dan Kelly, man. This is 3 in a row. And if he wants to try and get one more in the UFC, a win to go out on, I think we also know the level of opposition you should be booking him against, and it's pretty far removed from the Tom Breezes of the world, even with that layoff. Lena Landsberg defeated Gina Mazzani via unanimous decision. This was an utterly uninteresting fight. Only thing of note that I kind of took away from this, Every time they wound up in the clinch, Gina Mazzani was trying to wrap the head of Landsberg like she was trying to set up that god-awful head and arm throw. And every time she wrapped the head, Landsberg did what you're kind of supposed to do. She dropped her base a little bit, got proper head position under her opponent, and started to keep the posture upright, and started throwing knees to the exposed abdomen. That's a really good way to beat that basic position. Beyond that, not a whole lot of interest. Carlo Pedersoli Jr. defeated Brad Scott via split decision. Not the worst fight in the world. Pedersoli has some really nice kicks. His punches, by contrast, need a fair amount of work. But he's a bit of a wild man. I was really surprised Scott wasn't able to kind of close this out, because Scott had a really good first round and then just kind of let it slip away. Jillian Robertson defeated Molly McCann via technical submission, rear naked choke in the second round. McCann just had nothing for Robertson on the mat. And once Robertson realized that, in the first round, she just forced it to the mat in the second very quickly, proceeded to just dominate her positionally and then tap her out. And on Fight Pass, Elias Theodorou defeated Trevor Smith via unanimous decision, 30-27 twice, won 29-28. Not a whole lot here. Just a lot of getting into the clinch and then dirty boxing, throwing knees to the... This was a brutally paced fight in the sense that these two were, doing damage to each other. But, just of... excuse me. Severe lack of refinement from both guys. And for a guy who lists one of his primary strengths as his cardio, Elias Theodorou really has a bad habit of slowing down in the third round after he blows himself out in the first two. Anyway, that was the rest of the fights from that event. Jeff, any burning desires from the prelims?
I was heartbroken by Dan Kelly's loss, but it was a good win for Tom Breeze. He hurt his opponent. He capitalized on it. Dan Kelly stopped protecting himself, and that's what you got to do. And good for Jillian Robertson, beating the hometown girl who came in overweight. And, I don't know. Elias Theodorou, he picked up a win over Trevor Smith. I don't know. I just don't see Theodorou becoming like a major star, but
he seems to be plateauing, and I can't figure out why.
He has 7 wins now. He's 7-2.
He does. This is clearly not. He's clearly got aptitude.
It's a solid resume, but I don't know. Like, I hear him in interviews, and he sounds intelligent, but he keeps harping on I started training late, blah blah blah, and I'm like, I don't know. He seems fixated on weird things. But he got results last night.
It's got to be his burgeoning career as the ring boy for Invicta. That's clearly distracting him from his training.
It's weird. Like, I want him to be better, but I wonder if he could compete with higher level opponents. I don't know, I'm not sure.
Those are his major losses, and bear in mind when he stepped up, we're not even talking about massive step-ups. He lost to Thiago Santos and Brad Tavares aren't cans. But
he beat Dan Kelly before Dan Kelly lost to Tom Breeze.
He beat Dan Kelly in the his fight prior to this one.
All right. So yeah, that's about it for me for Burning Desires.
Alrighty. Thanks to everyone who got up early to follow along with that or has read the report after it's been published afterwards. Again, I don't know why you patronize my work, but you do, and God bless you for it.
So now we have another card, but this one's on Friday instead of Saturday.
Yep. Friday, June 1st from Utica, New York.
Okay. Good main event.
Very good main event. I actually don't hit the co-main event either.
Let's see. I don't love the co-main event.
You have to be...
But Jake Ellenberger. Goodness gracious.
I don't know how he and Ben Saunders still have jobs.
Ben Saunders, I like Ben Saunders at least. Like, he's a likable guy.
Sure, who's lost 2 in a row, barely got that win over Court McGee. He's been brutalized his last 2 fights. Like,
I mean, considering that Saunders probably got cut prematurely earlier in his career, I'm fine with it.
eh. And then, again, you've got Ellenberger, who's... We don't even know. Like, Ellenberger makes no sense.
I guess they felt bad for him after what happened in the Masvidal.
Look, the man is like 2 and
his record
in his
his
last
record
9.
is unbelievable. Like,
I mean, one of those wins is over Josh Koscheck. Like, really?
and Matt Brown.
Again, like, that was legit.
But that was almost 2 years ago. So
yeah,
even that was a while ago.
But anyway, the main event is a really good fight. It's a bantamweight fight between Jimmie Rivera and Marlon Moraes. These two have been sniping at each other for a while. They're both very high-level bantamweights.
I'm going with Rivera.
I could make I could make an argument for either guy. I really
go to the head, Rivera. He's my guy.
I think the primary thing Rivera's going to have to contend with. Think about this for a second.
Moraes does have. I mean, he's got some power in it. He's got some heavy hands.
The big thing Rivera's going to have to.
He's dangerous. He's a very dangerous opponent.
The thing Rivera's going to really have to contend with is kind of the unpredictability of Moraes. Jimmie, if he can get a read on you and he can really kind of feel you out, is great. He is a profoundly great fighter in many respects. He's severely underappreciated. But he's kind of hittable if he gets into wild exchanges. And
his only finish in the UFC is against Marcus Brimage.
Yeah.
That was almost 3 years ago.
Oh, he's not a big finish guy.
Yeah.
Just throughout his career.
But he's very dominant.
Oh, yeah. He's
very strong.
He's strong. He's fast, especially with his hands. He incorporates leg kicks into his game. He's a good wrestler.
He's very well-rounded.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's just kind of why I'm leaning toward Rivera. Just kind of edging this out, really.
It's entirely possible. Has Rivera ever fought 5 rounds?
I don't believe he has. Let me see.
Once back in 2011.
So in King of the Cage, not in the UFC.
Yes.
In 2010. So it's been a while. It's been a while since he's had a 5-round fight.
Yeah.
And he's still 28, so he's still got...
These are both young guys. Right. And Moraes, the last time Moraes went 5 rounds was in 2015.
And that was against Josh Hill.
The primary reason I wanted to look at that was I know Moraes has trained extensively for 5-round fights. Again, like his entire World Series of Fighting run was not.
He was the best guy in World Series of Fighting, really,
by a significant margin.
So I'm glad he's finally in the UFC at least. I just like Rivera here. I think he is more likely to dominate and just fight a little smarter and just edge Sterling out. Because, look, Moraes still has that Los Dawson's out. And that's kind of why I'm leaning toward Rivera.
Yeah, that's fair. And
he did not look great against John Dodson. Granted, it was John Dodson, and John Dodson is very good, but Dodson is also very gun shy, and he tends to be very hit and miss with his performances. He tends to wait and kind of hang back a lot.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see what kind of pace Rivera's going to try and push, whether or not, just how willing he is to really get into a firefight.
He can push a fast pace.
He can. The question is, will he? And I mean, to what degree does that actually benefit him? Again, you might try to fight really high output and find out that that's not the best strategy for him.
I don't know if you want to do that against a guy like Moraes. I agree.
I'm not sure how well. This sounds really weird. I'm not sure how well Rivera can change gears. A lot of his
That's
success,
why I like this fight.
Yeah,
we'll find out.
And that's a question that Marlon Moraes is going to ask of him, because Moraes changes gears very well. It doesn't all again for all of some of his shortcomings at times. That's one of the things he does really, really well. He can change things. He can change the pace at which he fights, and he finds odd openings that can really the Dodson fight's actually a good example of this. Some of the blows he was catching Dodson with when Dodson would kind of lunge in and try to get him were just exploiting very small openings that other guys haven't been able to reliably. I genuinely there's a very, very cogent argument that you can make for either guy in this case.
My only issue is that Rivera has only fought sporadically in the last couple years.
Yeah, some of that's him having a hard time finding opposition.
Right. True. He was supposed to fight a little while ago.
He was supposed to fight Cruz.
Right.
Which I was really looking forward to, but
Cruz is injury prone.
And then he was supposed to fight John Lineker, but John Lineker pulled out.
Frickin' Lineker. At least this fight gives us a more definitive title contender, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, the winner of this is pretty much right there.
I feel like the winner of this fight, not even right there, I feel the winner of this fight should be fighting for the title next, no matter what.
Assuming no shenanigans because if we get either a bad stoppage or a draw coming out of,
all what ifs aside, the winner of this fight to me is the number one contender. The winner.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, he was supposed to fight Brian Caraway at one point, but Caraway pulled out. Which makes me sad because Rivera would have beat him like a drum.
It is sad because Caraway, I don't even know what's going on with him right now.
Yeah, who knows?
It's Caraway was basically right there. Didn't he inch into the top 5 basically after he beat Sterling?
Something like that.
Basically, he beat Wineland and Sterling, and then he fought Cody Stamann, and he lost to Stamann, and then it's he almost never. Let's see. That fight with Stamann was his first fight in almost 2 years.
Yeah. Oh, he was off for a while.
Yeah. I guess he was recovering from the breakup. Weird.
Finding a new training camp, probably. I don't know.
Weird.
Anyway, as for that fight, again, I'm just really looking forward to seeing them actually get in the cage and fight.
Mm-hmm.
Making a pick. I'll freely admit.
You like Moraes.
Just because you went Rivera, I'll go with Moraes.
All right. I know you like Moraes too, so
I like both these guys. I like both these guys a lot.
Good.
These are, again, everyone kind of gets lost when we talk about bantamweight, fixated on the top 3 because they're unbelievable. You've also in that division, you've got guys like Rivera and Moraes, and Sterling seems to kind of be putting things together. It's a really strong division.
All I can say is Rivera and Moraes, I have high hopes for this one. Don't let me down.
This card probably can't survive that fight if it falls through or if it really, really sucks. The co-main event, this is another one that I'm looking forward to on the card. Just because I've kind of come around on Vince Pichel lately.
He's been doing well lately.
I mean, he had that really long layoff after beating Anthony Njokuani, and then he knocked out Damian Brown. He beat Joaquim Silva in his last fight. And Gregor Gillespie is definitely someone you should be paying attention to in that division. He's undefeated. He's a Division I All-American national champion. He's
finished his last 3 fights, so he's
4-0 in the UFC.
Surging prospect.
Yeah, again, this is not someone you want to take lightly. And I'm really anxious to see what happens here because Vince Pichel is a logical step up in competition for him given how he's gone so far. Pichel's a solid puncher, a good counter wrestler, and again, he just asks the right questions of a guy developing like Gillespie, who has, again, absurd takedowns. I mean, a lot of times you see really, really great wrestling backgrounds that can be based around counter wrestling that is less effective in MMA. Gillespie will get you down without too much trouble. He's an offensive monster who's been putting a lot of work into his hands. Again, I like this fight, and I like Gillespie here. I mean, I'm going to need a pretty specific reason to pick against him, and while I'm not discounting Pichel here, because, again, he hits hard and he's good at stopping takedowns, especially once they hit the fence, but I like Gillespie kind of generally here to kind of keep on rolling, and I'm kind of high on the guy. He's going to hit a roadblock eventually that he can't overcome, but that's one of the reasons I like this fight. It's an appropriate step up for Gillespie relative to what we know of him so far. So I like it. I like Gillespie here, and I am kind of looking forward to this fight. It's the last fight on this card I'm actually going to say that about. No, there's one other. It's really random, but I'll get to that later. So, anyway. Have I sold you on this fight, Jeff, or are you...
I don't know if it's co-main event caliber, but it's a good
on
a good
this
fight.
Card it is.
To me, it's not caliber enough to be the co-main event. Heck, I would put Desmond Green versus T-Bow.
You can't
all
do that
things
recently.
considered.
You can't do that. I mean, T-Bow's coming off of not only a suspension, but a 3-fight losing streak.
All right. It's still Gleason T-Bow.
I respect Gleason T-Bow's career. I've had a soft spot for the guy for a while, and Green's on a 2-fight losing streak too.
We'll see.
They should probably be on the main card, especially over Ellenberger and Saunders. But
I do like both these guys, and I think Gillespie, he's a definite guy to watch. And I'll go ahead and pick Gillespie too. But I like both guys.
We're just going to do Burning Desires for the rest of this card, I think.
Good idea.
And we do have, again, at least...
It's slim pickings.
There's only one more that I'm looking forward to on this card, and I'll bring it up when I get to it. And we do have, the major news coming out over this last week that we do want to dedicate a bit of time to. Next up, because God hates me, Walt Harris fights Daniel Spitz. I don't know why. I just don't know. Walt Harris probably wins this fight, but... Oh yeah, Harris got DQ'd in his last fight. That was hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. I like Harris there. Jake Ellenberger fights Ben Saunders in another battle of Dear God, why? If Saunders had any power left in his hands, I would pick him. He's got good kicks, but his punching game is a little bit too suspect for me to pick him here. Sure, who cares? Julio Arce is fighting Daniel Tamer. This is not the one I was talking about, but... I'm confusing Daniel Tamer with someone else. Who am I confusing him with? His brother, David. Okay. Because David Tamer is actually pretty good. Daniel lost his UFC debut. He'll probably take this. Then we have a light heavyweight fight between John Vellante and Sam Alvey. I hate this fight. I really, really do. On the plus side, John Vellante is a robotic fighter, and he's going to walk forward on Sam Alvey and try to engage on him. And Sam Alvey likes guys who do that. And tends to flatten them with counter lefts. I'm rooting for Sam Alvey because I can't stand John Vellante's fights. As for the prelims, we have Sijara Eubanks and Lauren Murphy. Murphy coming off of that split decision win over Barb Honchak, whereas Eubanks was supposed to fight for the flyweight belt, but couldn't make weight. This is actually Eubanks' UFC debut. Yeah, I'll go with Eubanks here. I'm assuming she's got her weight under control. Nick Lentz is fighting David Tamer, the one who's actually kind of good. Lentz coming off of that really kind of surprising win over Will Brooks with a guillotine choke. Lost to Islam Makhachev before that, but Lentz he's not an easy guy to handle. Tamer, on the other hand, he beat Drakkar Klose his last time out. Yeah, he's the one who put on that really nice display of actually moving or fighting while moving backwards. I kind of like Tamer here. I should pick Lentz, but I'm going with Tamer. We were supposed to get Bilal Muhammad and Nico Price, which would have been a battle of crazy people. Sadly, Price was pulled from this card. Now Bilal Muhammad fights Chance Rencontre? Going with Rencontre until I know better. Muhammad should take this without too much issue. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, and he's not bad. As previously mentioned, Desmond Green fights Gleison Tebow. Make sure I'm remembering. This is purely sentimental on my part, but I'm picking Gleison Tebow. Again, that is purely sentimental on my part. Tebow is old. He is
34.
Yeah, he's up there for the sport, and he's up there in terms of miles. This is a guy with almost like 50 professional fights. But again, sentimentally, I'm picking Tebow. Then on Fight Pass, we have Jessica Aguilar and Jody Escobar. Boy, Aguilar better be able to at least put up a good fight here. She has kind of floundered in the UFC. I mean, her first fight was against Claudia Gadelha, which is somewhat understandable, especially given the, because again, Gadelha is good. Then she had nearly a 2-year layoff, and then kind of just not so good against Courtney Casey of all people. I mean, Courtney Casey isn't bad, but if Aguilar's going to turn into anything in this division, she really needs to turn things around here. Johnny Eduardo is back. Good for him.
For his one fight a year.
Yep. This would be his one fight for the year of 2018. He's fighting Nathaniel Wood. I'll go with Eduardo there. And then the other fight I'm actually looking forward to on this card kicks everything off. Jared Brooks, who is 1-1 in the UFC. Excuse me. But I've actually kind of... I've kind of come around on him as someone to pay attention to going forward at flyweight. He's fighting one of the better prospects in the division outside of the UFC in the form of Jose Shorty Torres. He's finally making his UFC debut, if memory serves. Again, these are not the guys you're going to want a hot shot into the title picture, but these are a couple of the guys who, 3-4 years from now are hopefully holding down the division. They're both, guys you want to look forward to in that particular sense. So that's the other one I'm kind of looking forward to on this card. Anyway, Jeff, there are some fights there. Anything you're looking forward to?
Desmond Green versus Tebow, and Lentz versus Teamer.
Alrighty. Yeah, again, there's slim pickings on this card, but if you know where to look, there's a few others that might surprise, that you can kind of get moderately excited about.
At least the main event is a great matchup on paper, and will hopefully deliver a number one contender. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. Of course, it won't actually, because the winner of Garbrandt and Dillashaw is going to make noise about fighting Mighty Mouse again.
Or Dominic Cruz.
I love Dominic Cruz, but at this point I think he has to win another fight before you put him back in the title picture.
Well, no, he doesn't. Because they booked an immediate rematch between between Garbrandt and Dillashaw. So no.
I say that only because of the layoff in this instance with Cruz.
It need not matter anymore.
They don't have
Claudio
to.
Silva just won from a 4-year layoff last night. Who cares?
Again, they don't have to. That's certainly true. They don't have to do much of anything except continue to make money. But again, there are complications. I would agree. I would rather see the winner of this fight for the belt next, but we'll see what happens. The sport is nuts. All right. I will have coverage of that again Friday afternoon in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. So stop by, say hello. I appreciate it. I'm probably going to need it on this card. All right, Jeff. We now know the future of the UFC as it pertains to the broadcast rights in the United States. So,
right,
take us through it.
So it looks like it'll be. Let's see. So now, ESPN previously had the digital streaming rights for the UFC, and now it's completed a deal for the UFC for TV rights for UFC MMA broadcasts. It officially starts January 1st, 2019, for 5 years, and it's worth $750 million.
It's worth more than that.
I might be.
It's what, 300 million? If memory serves, it was what, 300 million a year?
I don't know. This might have been a misprint.
Because I seem to recall it was about 300 million per year for 5 years, which comes to what, 1.5 billion over 5 years.
It says 750 million over 5 years.
I do not believe that.
Has agreed to commit 1.5 billion over the next 5.
Yeah,
I
about 300
think that
million
was,
a year.
I think something got lost in translation here in the article.
Math is hard. I don't blame.
You want to know? It's probably 750 million for the first half and 750 million for the second half is probably what they mean.
Yeah.
I assume that's
massive win for the UFC. All things considered.
I mean, not massive because it's below. I think it's below what they were previously looking for, but I think
it's widely accepted that the 400 million or so offer being bandied, goal they were being bandied about was very much on the high side. I mean, we don't have to actually worry about them being able to pay off their debt load month to month anymore.
But when you look at it in combination to the ESPN Plus deal, that's really good for the organization. So here's the details. It includes 10 full UFC cards a year between ESPN and ESPN2, along with prelims for 12 UFC pay-per-views. 20 additional shows will stream on ESPN Plus. That's with the other deal, including Dana White's Contender Series and a new All Access series. Fox Sports will retain rights for UFC broadcasts until the end of the year. But what's weird about this whole because Disney does own ESPN.
Yes.
And Disney is trying to buy Fox, but Fox Sports is not included in that acquisition.
No.
And neither is the Fox network.
Yeah. Disney's trying to buy a few of their specific intellectual properties and a few of their entertainment properties.
More than a few.
Yeah, my understanding was that the bid essentially excluded your local Fox News affiliates, all of the Fox Sports.
It excludes Fox Sports, Fox News, and the Fox Network.
Okay. So yeah, the network at large, but all of the
it includes FX. It includes the cable channels.
Yeah.
It includes Fox TV Production, 20th Century Fox the Movie Studio.
Yep.
And it includes Fox's 30% ownership of Hulu, which is a major. It may not sound like it, but that's
that's a big deal.
And it includes Sky Media, which is another big deal.
Yeah, if that goes through,
it's a little weird. It's a little weird though, and I don't know if. I hope ESPN doesn't get a buyer's remorse situation over this because Here's why I'm a little surprised, Robert. ESPN has been remarkably hands-off with MMA for quite a long time.
Yep.
So that's kind of why I'm a little surprised.
They were always on a competing network, and there wasn't necessarily always as much money to be made as there is now.
Maybe that, but they had their one MMA show. Like the ESPN had like one of the best MMA sports talk shows around. Wasn't MMA Live. Like
Okay.
that was a good show. And they basically phased it out. It took a long time. Like originally it was just digital, but then they finally got it on like an actual they got it on ESPN2, and then they just basically phased it out and killed it. After the Fox deal was made. So my hope is that ESPN doesn't bury the UFC and they actually promote it.
If they're paying that much and they bury it, they're just shooting themselves in the foot.
I mean, but we've seen corporations have done that before. You know? They have.
They have, but if ESPN wants to actually continue being a viable property under even owned by Disney, they really can't flush that kind of money down the toilet.
And we still have all this uncertainty with Conor McGregor, but I don't know what's happening there.
No one knows, man. Conor doesn't even know. There's a couple of big things that I took away from this, personally. One is the number of shows. We're still at the 40-plus mark, and bearing in mind that the UFC could still do Fight Pass exclusive cards under this deal, should they feel so inclined. So if ESPN Plus isn't going to carry an event and the UFC wants to have one that is exclusive to Fight Pass, that is, I believe, still permissible under the terms of the deal. So we're still looking at 12 pay-per-views a year, give or take, and 45-ish events a year, which is a lot. Believe me, it's a lot. The other thing that makes me incredibly happy about this is there is zero mention of The Ultimate Fighter. Absolutely none.
Well, Dana White already said this is the last season coming up.
Oh,
so
thank you.
So
and
there's
I don't even cover that crap. Larry Zonka thanks you because that poor man suffers enough.
So it looks like they don't have any plans to continue it on this new broadcast deal.
I know they had mentioned that they might consider shopping it around as its own property, but nobody buy that. It is just no one buy that. It is not
maybe
worth
international. I could see it continuing internationally, but that's it. I mean, come on.
Yeah, sure. If you still want to do,
there's not enough prospective talent on there to fill like a season anymore.
Especially not with the Contender Series serving that same purpose, but doing an exponentially better job of it.
Yeah, I agree. And Contender Series is supposed to continue under this new deal. Yeah. So, my major issue though is that unless something really amazing happens, I don't plan on getting a subscription to ESPN Plus. That's kind of my issue. I would do a free trial, but I mean, it's. I think we talked about this before. Like, someone has to figure out.
At the moment, ESPN Plus it just came out of beta. It's still not a finished platform yet.
Okay.
So there's elements of judgment I'm going to withhold. I will say this, and you're all listening to this on the internet, right? If you want to, I assume you're all intelligent people. This should not be news to anyone that if you want to watch things that are streaming on ESPN Plus but don't want to pay for ESPN Plus, there are ways to do that.
Yeah, it's the internet. People will figure it out.
Look, I'm not advocating for that.
I don't advocate it either.
But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that particular service does not exist.
But look, we're getting fights on ESPN. I
Sadly, the
now look,
UFC is retaining the majority of production control,
okay.
which means that Face the Pain is still going to be there, and that just makes me sad.
Um, and they're still going to do 12 pay-per-views a year.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good idea. I think they
I
need to
generally
consider.
agree with that.
I'm not saying they need to. And look, I don't know what the contract. They might have a contract situation with pay-per-view companies.
They might.
I'm well aware. I'm well aware of that, but I believe the UFC needs to think about start shedding some of the pay-per-view weight because look, if you look at their pay-per-view business overall, Robert, it hasn't been doing very well, right?
It
Based
has
on
been
what
significantly more peak and valley. I mean, Nurmagomedov and Iaquinta did not meet original expectations, was my understanding. Right. And look, Nunes versus Pennington. I've heard from other media outlets that this thing might have done less than 100,000 buys.
And that wouldn't surprise me. So I'm saying maybe you need only 8 or less, like 6 to 8, under this new deal, or start thinking about it.
I mean, at a minimum, it couldn't hurt to. This is one of the things that I think the UFC needs to kind of look at experimenting.
Because I feel like whatever money, I feel like they're going to make up that money. They're going to make up that. They're going to make that money back and then some.
You literally just signed a $1.5 billion television deal.
Right.
Pay-per-view is still, in many respects, going to be your big hits are going to be on pay-per-view.
Right.
Which is fine. I mean, my
but
issue with the pay-per-view model.
You don't have a roster that can support that many pay-per-views.
At the moment, you most certainly do not. I mean, look at the next couple of pay-per-views that we have announced that we know about for the rest of 2018. We know 225 coming up, and which is a double title fight.
But even that fight is, I feel that the drawing potential of 225 is fairly low.
Yeah, I mean, and my point being that they're so desperate for pay-per-view draws, they're actually putting CM Punk on the pay-per-view opener.
Mm.
I mean, that's how much we're trying to get people to buy is...
Okay, and then 226... You have Holloway versus Ortega and Cormier versus Miocic. But even those guys aren't major draws on pay-per-view by themselves.
None of them have proven to be major pay-per-view draws yet. Now, together, and again, that's a really good card.
Right. Together it is a really good card, and they might be able to put some good numbers.
That'll probably do solid numbers. Nothing that'll break the bank open, but that'll do solid numbers.
And what else?
Then 227 is Dillashaw versus Garbrandt 2.
I mean, that might do okay. Like, okay-ish.
Yeah, I mean, Garbrandt and Dillashaw both actually have a little bit broader appeal, and, I mean, their first fight was great.
Let me see. 207. Well, 207 had Rousey on it.
Yeah, I get they're coming off of an event that got them the most exposure they were going to get, realistically.
But let me see.
I mean, 227 is still coming together as an event. We don't know.
I'm trying to. I'm just something I'm trying to figure out.
But I mean, after that, we don't actually have 228 announced yet.
Right.
I mean, yeah, we don't even have a date and venue for 228.
Right. True.
229 we know is going to be in Vegas on October 6th, but beyond that, we know nothing.
229. And again, another thing that comes out of this deal is what's in it for the fighters.
Nothing.
Hey,
fighters! Congratulations! Your promotion just signed a $1.5 billion contract over 5 years, and you get to see nothing.
I feel like, I don't know. I feel like there should be something they should do fighter-oriented to kind of, at the very least, pat themselves on the back. as self-serving as that sounds.
I mean, at a minimum, bear in mind, at like a bare minimum, you should probably look at increasing the post-fight bonuses from like
something
50
like
to
that.
60,000. I mean, you only hand out 3 of those an event, occasionally 4, sometimes less.
Well, they hand out 4 bonuses total.
In theory.
Right.
Again, in theory,
what if they offered? What if they just double, like just say we're doubling the fight of the night bonuses?
I don't know that you want to throw around that much money necessarily right now, all things considered, but
60 doesn't sound that impressive, honestly.
I mean, look, if all you're looking for is a pat yourself on the back goodwill gesture that will keep the and I'm going to say this, and I know this carries severely negative connotations. I don't have a low opinion of fighters, but if you want to do something that will look moderately decent and keep the unwashed masses in line, spending an extra $40,000 per event, you know. It's pretty well established that the athletes in any sport are not entitled, but have universally negotiated for something like half of all television broadcast fees and licenses and whatnot.
But fighters don't have a union.
Congratulations, guys.
They don't have a union. They don't have collective bargaining. So,
just saying, they just signed a massively lucrative deal, and you guys are seeing nothing. Congratulations. I'm not even necessarily like pro union, but
look, I mean, it happened. It happened with the buyout as well.
Yeah,
the people who got rich off of that were the Fertittas and Dana White.
Yep,
not the fighters. It was the owners. So, and you know what? I applaud. And you know what, Robert? I applaud the Fertitta brothers.
Darn right. Well,
because
I mean, look, without Dana and Lorenzo specifically, but that's because the other one liked to be more in the background. Without those guys, sport does not exist as it does right now.
But it's not just that. Like I mean, what is smarter than that?
They bought it for
lost
an incredibly
millions
cheap
of dollars.
they
stuck
bought
it out.
Oh yeah, they invested so much money just to keep the sport afloat.
And lost tons of it. And they lost
the first what was it? This is all just anecdotal based on the people that reference it, but up until like that first season of The Ultimate Fighter, they were losing money annually.
Right.
And they stuck it out, man, and you know what?
But that's why I applaud them. Because
they deserved that on a feel-good level.
That's got to be,
and they deserved it on an intelligence level.
That's got to be one of the biggest success stories on the planet, right?
That kind of return on investment is obscene. I mean, even though they lost money for a few years, they were not
in that amount of time. In that amount of time, like how long has the NFL been making money? Probably
not
like decades,
since its
right?
inception, but they actually struggled a bit before they merged with the AFL. But since their merger with the AFL, basically.
So the NFL was founded in 1920, so it's been almost 100.
It was a miserable failure for its first several years.
Right. So but the Fertittas own this. When did they buy the UFC? 2001.
Oh, something like that. I want to say.
So basically, over the course of a decade and a half, they turned
about 20
a
about
sport
20
that
years.
was all right. So a
give
sport that
give
was,
or take
less than 20 years.
Yeah, a little less than 20.
In less than 20 years, they turned a sport that was losing money into $1 billion.
Sport. Was a joke.
Right. Into $1 billion industry.
To a $4 billion company. Yeah.
and they deserve to be applauded for that.
They
I
deserve to
don't
be
care.
applauded. We all owe them a
As
substantial debt of gratitude.
as a capitalist, I can do nothing but applaud that.
Yeah.
Okay? And they deserve so much credit.
Oh, yeah.
At the same time, though, and I'm not, and I'm not saying like fighters should go on strike or whatever, but like, I think the fighters should get something out of this too. I'm not going to say what it should be, but I feel like that,
they are really just letting. I don't want to get too into this.
Be fine. I'd be fine if there was just a goodwill, pat themselves on the back kind of thing.
They have. Fighters are just kind of letting themselves be taken advantage of in a financial sense at this point because they either won't or can't get along long enough to get some kind of collective thing going.
And again, here's my thing. If fighters want all those things, it's up to them. It's up to them. It's not up to the and
it's one of the reasons I don't say they're entitled to it. To whatever their roughly 50% is industry standard across other major sporting leagues. The athlete's getting in around 50%. I think there's some variance between sports, but
I just feel like
they're not entitled to it. They're entitled to what they get, to what they are willing to get for themselves.
If there was a massive halt or something on this sport, you mean to tell me that the heads at ESPN, WME, IMG couldn't come together and work something out? Would not be.
This gets not to become because I am a horrible anti-Marxist. If you want to get into my personal philosophy, but just imagine for a minute if, as of right now, no fighter, not even no fighter, half of the UFC's roster, so call it 250 fighters, give or take, simply stop signing bout agreements. The UFC's business model as it currently stands could not operate.
Right.
Straight couldn't.
But again, the key there, it's the fighters that have,
and again,
their responsibility.
It is.
It's not the UFC's.
It's one of the reasons I've stopped. It's one of the reasons I've stopped moaning about it. The same way some other people have kind of continued. Look, you're all. I assume that the majority of fighters are not stupid people.
Right.
You're all able to see this. You're all able to understand the basic economics of it. If you are all either collectively, either explicitly or tacitly, going along the same way things are going along right now, you're only ever going to get what you have already got. And again, that is entirely on them. And again, I'm fundamentally a capitalist when it comes to things like this. If they're not willing to fight for that and to negotiate for that and to recognize the power that they have, because they do have that power. That's a real thing. Then I'm not going to waste time crying and moaning for them. Unless there is legitimately unethical or illegal practices going on behind the scenes, it's entirely on them.
Can we get some crossover with the Walt Disney theme parks?
Probably not.
Why not?
I mean, you're really going to overhaul, a Walt Disney ride or? No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Come on.
We can't get an attraction or something. Come on. Even Universal Studios did Fear Factor Live for a while.
Sure. Universal also puts on, live shows like that on a regular basis that they can cycle through.
I don't know. I feel like you're being closed-minded here, Robert. I feel like
if you wanted to set up something in, Disneyland at a specific time where you you couldn't even actually have fighters. You'd actually have to have actors pretending to be fighters. Show up and put on a staged bout type thing. I don't know, maybe. Okay,
so here's another thing we're getting from the ESPN Plus. There's going to be a new All Access series produced by IMG Original Content.
Yeah. I'm kind of burned out on those, but
here we go. Pre and post event shows for all 30 UFC. Oh, wait, I misread that. I thought it was going to be a 30 for 30.
No. Maybe. Hey, it's not like there aren't interesting stories to be told. You know?
Yeah, I would like to get some 30 for 30 specials based around the sport, wouldn't you?
I would. Again, there are some really interesting both characters, and even if you didn't want to focus on a specific fighter, there's a handful of, you could do a 30 for 30 series just focusing on, the first 5 UFC events.
Yeah,
or
for sure.
A specific series of events
The
that
early
you could talk
years.
about. Yeah,
The early years.
Oh, the Dark Ages had some really, really crazy stuff. Like, there's a lot of stuff you could do. I mean, get John McCarthy.
But the early years of
down...
UFC on pay-per-view actually did decent numbers, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the original UFC 1, they were shooting for like 25,000 buys, and they did like somewhere between 80 and 100.
Yeah, I think they did 150, I want to say.
Something like that. The second one was more. The third one was over 300,000. They'd kill for that now, and UFC 3 wasn't terribly
UFC
good.
UFC 1, did 86,000.
Which was still like 3 times as much as they were expecting.
UFC 3 did 90. Yeah, I mean, the early UFC events were interesting.
Again, there's some interesting stuff you could do. I mean, if you've never heard, Big John McCarthy on, the Joe Rogan Experience, for example, that guy will talk, and he's got some really interesting stories that he can, document and prove about a lot of those early things. Again, there's interesting stories to be told there. I do hope someone in the 30 for 30 vein takes them up.
Okay. So I guess that was the really big news, and
oh yeah,
Phil Davis got a head kick knockout on Bellator 200 in the Nelson Crow Cop rematch that we've all
fell apart. Yeah, and Mirko some kind of leg injury.
Yeah, so I guess that'll be rescheduled.
Maybe.
I'm not a big Bellator fan, but Michael Venom Page he's a fun fighter to watch.
God, I wish he would fight someone who mattered.
But at the same time, I think Bellator is probably the best place for him.
3 years ago it was. 3 years ago it was absolutely the right place for him. At this point, we are bordering on wasting time.
And it looks like Mousasi might fight.
Mousasi won the middleweight title
against Rafael Carvalho, and it looks like they're talking.
Legit, man.
I mean, he was arguably a top contender when he left.
Oh, he was.
Kind of middleweight's
pretty good run.
It's kind of crappy that UFC let him go, I think, but looks like he might be fighting Rory McDonald next, is what they're talking about.
I could see it.
Oh, I think this is the last major story I think we can address today. Nick Diaz got arrested late last week on multiple charges of domestic violence. He's already been released on bail. It was like domestic violence by strangulation. The UFC released a statement on it. UFC is aware of the recent arrest of middleweight athlete Nick Diaz. The organization does not tolerate domestic violence and requires all athletes to adhere to the UFC fighter conduct policy. Every athlete is deserving of due process in this situation, as with any official allegations, will be duly reviewed and thoroughly investigated by an independent party.
There's some pretty there's some, and I don't know how much you want to.
Here's what I love the most about this story on MMA Fighting. They actually say Front Row Brian was the first to report the news of this situation Friday morning. Which, look, not to bash Front Row Brian, but I mean, use the guy's real name. I mean, come on, Front Row Brian.
You can easily put his Twitter handle after his real name.
Yeah,
come on.
Like Brian blank, his last name, aka Front Row Brian. Okay,
yeah,
come on. Come on here. You're MMA fighting, Mark Raimondi. Come on here.
I'm not going to comment on that situation at the moment because
it's under investigation.
It's developing, and there's
I don't know the whole story.
There's some non-trivial anecdotal.
It looks bad.
It looks bad for him. It really does. And if he is guilty, he should be in prison. I want to make that unequivocally clear.
Didn't Overeem some years back had not a domestic violence, but he had some sort of like alleged assault thing.
Or a woman. He might have.
It was
probably in Holland.
It was like 6 years ago, I want to say.
Again, like, the reason I don't want to comment here is
misdemeanor battery. It was in 2012.
Yeah, this could get pled down. This could be. Let me reiterate before I make my next point. If this is true, Nick Diaz should be in jail. That said,
well, he was in jail. He was released. I think what you really mean, he should be in prison.
Yeah, sure. I know there's a difference. Mark yells at me about it all the time. Again, if this is true, and if he is convicted, he should be in prison. That's my stance on this.
Right.
That
I
said,
agree.
There does have to be due process. We cannot become a wild bunch of screaming mobsters.
Well, it's too late for that in this day and age.
I'm taking a stand against. I am taking a stand against it.
All trial by social media in court of public opinion.
I'm taking a stand against all of those things. I may be the last person to die on this hill, but I will go down swinging.
Even against Morgan Freeman?
Yes. Look,
even against Harvey Weinstein, who technically has not been convicted.
He has not. Again, if he is convicted, and if there is, this is one of those things that, like with the whole Me Too movement, I don't want to go off too far on this tangent.
Okay.
It's important to understand that it is possible to believe someone when they come forward, because that's not an easy thing, and still actually expect due process and the rule of law to be the rule of law. Those two things can exist simultaneously.
I think that's a very pragmatic. It's a very pragmatic view, Robert. I'll say that.
I mean, because again, I think that abusing women is immoral, unethical, and should be punished severely.
All terms that seem to fit Nick Diaz very well, though.
We'll see. Again, like, and look, my thing here is, again, if he's guilty, yeah, that's what I do want him in prison if he's guilty of this. It's also honestly, is it really out of the realm of possibility that the type of people Nick Diaz attracts into his circle might be unstable enough to fabricate or exaggerate this? Is that really so far out of the realm of possibility as well?
I mean,
and I'm not a Diaz apologist.
But Diaz has sort of made a reputation of being MMA's bad boy, unintentionally or not, for like the last
career.
For his entire
the last 15 years.
Yeah, 15 years basically. I mean, he got into fights with fighters at hospitals. Okay, like you shouldn't even like
threw a shoe at Joe Riggs.
I mean, quite frankly, Robert, talk about going to jail. To me, you should be going to jail for that. You know why? Because there are sick people in there who, doing, people could get hurt if you're doing that, Yeah. That's not, you shouldn't be doing that.
No.
So, and that's even putting aside all the marijuana, because I've, given up caring about that.
That's not worth going into in any sort of real way.
Yeah, but there are plenty of just asinine things.
Again, like let me put it like this.
He basically admitted to tax evasion. So, there's that. I don't know how...
I'll just put it like this. I'm going to wait for the evidence, but I find it difficult to imagine a scenario that I would find unbelievable or implausible coming out of this whole circumstance.
Did he not basically admit to tax evasion? Come on. He basically confessed to tax evasion. People... And the government throws the book at people for that. Wesley Snipes went to prison for that. Come on.
Yeah, and he's been making crappy movies ever since.
Right.
Nicolas Cage is kind of the same thing, right? He just makes these terrible, terrible movies to pay back the government.
Well, Wesley Snipes was doing that before he got incarcerated as well.
It didn't help. That's very true. Anyway, we'll see how that plays out as it develops.
off topic, but was there a good Wesley Snipes movie after Blade 2? I can't think of.
Hang on. Let me look it up.
Because I didn't like Blade 3. That was.
I have a brother that I vehemently disagree with over that movie because I thought it was ass.
And I don't like
after Blade 2?
3. I don't like Expendables 3. And I love Blade 2.
I do kind of enjoy Expendables 3, but that's probably the only...
I even like Demolition Man.
Oh, Demolition Man's great.
Like, I think Demolition Man today, I feel like is more brilliant than ever. Because I feel Demolition...
Yeah,
I feel like
it's amazing. It's amazing the degree to which it predicted elements of today's culture.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
Like 25 years later, Demolition Man is like more relevant than ever for whatever.
It's the only decent movie featuring Rob Schneider.
So yeah,
I have a very big soft spot for Demolition Man. A lot of fun, a lot of good memories with that movie.
Oh, I think there was one. He did one like gritty. He did like one really gritty, like kind of cop movie. I think that was decent.
Brooklyn's Finest, maybe.
Yeah, Brooklyn's Finest. That was decent.
I haven't seen that one yet, but yeah, Blade 2 is kind of the last one there. Okay. Oh, Undisputed is actually, if you like boxing movies, Undisputed is good.
Okay.
Because that's got some really interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, you have to like boxing movies, but him and Ring Rames throwing movies down in prison under London prize ring rules. It's one of the last movies that Peter Falk appeared in, too, if memory serves.
Okay.
But yeah, that's really kind of it.
It's all I'm in agreement with you about Nick Diaz. You know, it has to run its course. Same thing with Conor McGregor, as angry as I am about that whole thing.
I mean, I would only submit the primary difference in this circumstance is the existence of widely distributed visual evidence.
Peter Falk's last movie was American Cow Slip in 2009.
Okay. Again, one of his last ones. So
it wasn't even one of his last ones. He did Shark Tale, Checking Out, The Thing About My Folks. This was a good little movie with Paul Reiser. That was a good movie.
Peter Falk's. I have a lot of good. Peter Falk was a great actor.
He did quite a few movies after Undisputed.
Okay.
So he was getting up there, but he was still doing.
Don't know why I misremembered that then. All right.
Because his work wasn't quite as prolific, and he was getting toward the end of his life, but he was still working and doing stuff.
Okay. All right. On that note, I believe that's all the major news.
Better than Corky Romano.
Just why? Just why?
I wanted to say Corky Romano so bad.
This is the darkest timeline. All right, Jeff, what are you going to plug?
Okay, check out my review of Solo, A Star Wars Story, the first Star Wars movie that could very well be a bomb at the box office. Well, Forbes is calling it a bomb. Could be the lowest grossing Star Wars movie ever at the very least. Check out my review of Deadpool 2. I have stuff coming up for E3, for Cloak and Dagger, and lots of fun stuff coming up. And so thank you, Robert, and see you next week.
I'll be here. All right, as for myself, again, you can read my full report of UFC Fight Night 130 and the MMA Zone 411 Mania. Friday, I'll have coverage of Fight Night 131, so again, stop by and say hello. For my non-MMA related projects, last Tuesday, Mark Radulich and I got together to review Deadpool 2. Interesting discussions were had about its use of themes relative to the first one. We yelled at critics, all the good stuff that usually comes out of Damn You Hollywood, so you can give that a listen to get our thoughts on Deadpool 2. Minor spoiler, I suppose. I didn't like it, but I didn't like the first one, so you can listen to Mark and I have a discussion about that and our reasoning for it. My reasoning for it. I don't want to go into the whole thing here. this Tuesday, Mark and I will be reviewing, as Jeff just mentioned, Solo, Star Wars tale. Mark's seen it. I haven't yet. I don't have a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for it, but I'm prepared to be surprised by it. So I will, again, you can tune in Tuesday. That's when the review will be published. It doesn't go live anymore, so to speak, but so you can listen to Mark and I talk about that, and I'll be back here next week, so you can get a further update on the schedule at that point. Until then, thank you all. Seriously, guys, thank you for listening. I mean, again, there's so many MMA podcasts, and there's a lot of them that are better than this one. I can name at least 5 off the top of my head. I'm not going to, but I could. I'm not giving them free advertising. They're already bigger than this one. But there's a non-trivial amount that are worse, so thank you for listening to this one. Thank you for telling your friends. If you have friends who are interested in the sport, please point them in our direction. We are still trying to grow this thing, so that's always appreciated. Share us. You can follow the Radlich Broadcasting Network on Facebook to receive updates on all the things going on. Anything else? No, I don't want him following anything else. I'm grouchy. Again, we'll be back next week. Until then, thank you. For Jeff, I'm Robert. Stay safe out there, because the world's crazy, and only getting crazier. And please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.